The air in the hospital hallway was too still, too sterile, as if the world had stopped breathing. "The treatment will cost over $100,000, the doctor said, his tone clinical, devoid of compassion. "And there's less than a 10% chance of recovery." No one cried. No one shouted or pleaded or asked questions. My mother, Veronica, adjusted her pearl earring, looked at my uncle, and said, "Let the old man go. He's had a good run. We're not emptying our bank accounts into a bottomless pit." And just like that, they left point one by one, like they were walking away from a disappointing dinner party rather than the man who raised them. I stood there frozen, 17, broke, afraid, and angry. So angry, but I stayed. Thomas More wasn't just the old man. He was my grandfather, the only parent I ever really had. And I would not let him die alone. They thought they left me with a burden. They didn't know they left me with the only person who had ever made me feel like I mattered. The nurse beside me shifted awkwardly. "Are you Elena Moore?" I nodded. Swallowing the lump in my throat, she held out a clipboard. "We'll need someone to assume financial responsibility. The insurance covers about 30%, and without immediate intervention." She trailed off. "He likely won't survive the week." I didn't hesitate. My hands shook, but I signed every form. Each signature felt like a nail in the coffin of my future. I emptied my college fund, $11,200 scraped together from scholarships, part-time shifts at a diner, and tutoring kids after school. Then I marched down to the hospital's HR office and begged for a job, any job. By that evening, I was mopping floors on the pediatric floor, bleach stinging my hands, my uniform one size 2 big. By night, I sat at Grandpa's bedside, watching the machines blink and beep, whispering prayers I wasn't even sure I believed in. He didn't wake for 3 days. When he finally did, his voice was cracked like dry leaves. His hand barely twitched in mine. But when his eyes opened, and he saw me sitting there, he whispered one word: "You stayed." I nodded through tears. "Always." That was the first time in my life I realized what love was. It wasn't words. It wasn't birthday cards or family dinners. It was staying. It was holding someone's hand in the dark when everyone else walks away. That night, while Grandpa slept, I sat in the plastic chair by the window, staring out at the city lights. Life kept moving out there, cars honking, people laughing in restaurants. But something inside me had changed. A part of me had cracked wide open. They thought they'd left me behind with a dying man, but what they really did was give me time to become someone new. The doctor said a week. But 1 week became 2. Then 3. It started small, a twitch in his fingers, the flutter of eyelids, the grip of his hand growing stronger. I read to him every evening. At first, I didn't know if he could hear me. But I read anyway, old war novels, magazines, even an IKEA instruction manual just to fill the silence with something that felt human. One afternoon, as I spoon-fed him broth, he blinked at me and said hoarsely, "Too salty." I froze. "Grandpa? You always were awful at seasoning," he murmured with a tired smile. I laughed, full and unfiltered, through tears. It was the most beautiful complaint I had ever heard. Recovery wasn't fast, but it was steady. Soon he was sitting up, talking longer, even walking again, slowly, with my arm around his. The doctors called it a miracle. I called it love. We moved into a small, crumbling 2-room apartment across the street from the hospital. The walls were chipped, the heater clicked every 15 minutes, and we shared a bathroom with 2 strangers, but we were together. During the day, I worked hospital shifts. At night, I took GED courses online. And every evening after dinner, Grandpa taught me, not just math and physics, but how to fix things. Toasters, radios, broken fans, most people throw things away when they break, he told me once, holding out a soldering iron. But if you understand how something works, you can rebuild it. Same goes for people. I didn't know it then, but those nights in our cramped kitchen were changing my life. One evening, I rewired a light switch in our microwave while he watched. "You've got the mind of an engineer," he said. I smiled. More like a janitor who's scared of blowing up her leftovers. But I tucked that compliment away, deep in my heart. It was the first time anyone believed I could be more than where I came from. The silence from my family became a permanent fixture. At first, I waited. I told myself they just needed time. That when Grandpa recovered, when I told them he made it, they'd come around. They didn't. The shared bank account my mother used to oversee? Closed. The family phone plan? Disconnected without a word. The last text I ever got from her said, "You made your choice. Don't come asking us for anything later." No explanation. No confrontation. Just erasure. I cried for 3 days. Not because I regretted anything, but because I finally understood, they hadn't just walked away from him. They'd walked away from me too. Grandpa noticed the sadness I tried to hide. He never badmouthed them. Never told me I was better off. He simply sat beside me, held my hand, and said, "Some people only love when it's easy. You're not one of those people." Money got tight, fast. I worked double shifts. Cleaned operating rooms at night, managed inventory for the hospitals. Supply desk during the day. I studied for my GED during breaks, huddled on a bench outside the service elevator. I skipped meals so Grandpa could eat better. He hated that. So we made a deal. He would teach me everything he knew, mechanics, circuits, basic programming, if I promised to charge people when I fixed things. We started small. A broken lamp here. A flickering outlet there. By month 3, we had a shoebox under the bed labeled Repair Fund. By month 6, neighbors were knocking at our door. "Elena, my coffee machine won't turn on." "Elena, can you look at my space heater?" "Elena and Mr. Moore, I know this is weird, but can you build me a garden timer that waters my roses at night?" We never advertised. We didn't need to. People said the same thing every time, "You don't just fix things. You care." One night, I was hunched over an old toaster, replacing its heating coil, when Grandpa said, "You don't need their name to build your own." I looked up, confused. "Whose name?" He didn't answer. Just smiled and twisted another wire into place. That was when I realized, he wasn't preparing me for revenge. He was preparing me for independence. That winter, I passed my GED exams. The following summer, I was accepted into a Women in STEM program through a local tech college. It was part-time, late at night, designed for non-traditional students. I almost didn't apply. Thought I didn't belong. I was still scrubbing floors, still patching wires in broken blenders, but Grandpa said, "The people who belong aren't the ones born into rooms, they're the ones who build doors." So I built one. And I walked through it. 7 years passed. 7 years since that hospital hallway. 7 years since I signed those papers with trembling hands. 7 years since I became the girl who stayed, and in those 7 years, I became someone else entirely. I became Elena Moore, not just a janitor. Not just a granddaughter, but a systems builder. A fixer. A woman who turned silence into signal. It started in our garage. Grandpa and I prototyped a wearable fall detection device. For elderly patients. Something affordable. Discreet. Simple. He wore the first one everywhere. Field testing, he called it, though most of the time he was just pretending to trip over kitchen chairs. We called the device Safip. We pitched the prototype to a community clinic. They loved it. A small grant came in. Then another. We hired 2 interns who believed in the mission so much they worked for coffee and hope. By year 5, Safip was a registered LLC. By year 6, we had supply contracts with 3 elder care facilities in the state. By year 7, our devices protected over 10,000 seniors. Grandpa was our advisor. Our mascot. Our chief field tester. But most importantly, he was my anchor. Every decision, every software patch, every late-night sketch session, we did it together. He didn't always say much. But when he did, it counted. Success, he told me once, means nothing if it makes you forget who you are. One winter, the local paper ran a feature on us, from hospital janitor to CEO, the woman who rewired her future. I didn't send it to my mother. I didn't need to. It spread through town. Through extended family. Through every person who once said I was wasting my life on a dying man. They started crawling out of the cracks. A cousin emailed, "Hey. Long time. We should catch up." Someone from my mother's old bridge club messaged on LinkedIn. I didn't reply, because I knew what they didn't. My name didn't come from them. It came from every sleepless night. Every bill I scraped to pay. Every whisper from Grandpa when I felt like giving up. He was 91 when his health started to slip again, slower. This time. Softer. He still drank his coffee each morning. Still tinkered with my prototype sketches. Still smiled when I walked into the room, but we both knew, it was time. I wasn't ready. I, who had survived so much, wasn't ready to let go. He passed on a Tuesday morning. Soft light spilled into the room, like the world knew it needed to be gentle that day. I found him in his chair, the one by the window he always called his thinking spot. A closed book rested in his lap. A half-drunk cup of tea sat on the side table. He was smiling. No machines. No tubes. Just peace. I sat beside him, holding his hand, and whispered, "You stayed, and so did I." The funeral was small, just like he'd wanted. No suits. No grand speeches. Just the neighbors he helped, the nurse who called him her favorite patient, and a few of our earliest Safip partners. I was thanking people at the edge of the churchyard when I heard it, the sharp sound of heels on gravel. I turned, and froze. There. They were. My mother. My uncle. His wife. My cousin in a black suit that looked like it belonged at a stockholder meeting, not a funeral. My mother stepped forward, arms outstretched like we hadn't just lived through 7 years of silence. "Elena. Darling. You've grown into such a beautiful woman." I didn't move. Didn't blink. She smiled tighter. "We know things got complicated back then. But we're still family. And your grandfather, he would have wanted us all together for this." I almost laughed, almost reminded her how she left me in a hospital hallway like discarded mail. Instead, I nodded toward the chapel. "He's inside. You have 5 minutes." After the funeral, I was folding leftover programs and donation slips for our newest elder care grant when she approached again, my mother, this time wearing that familiar tight smile I remembered from every birthday she pretended to care about. "So," she began lightly, "about the estate." She said it like she was asking for the time. "We assume there's a will," she added. "Your grandfather wasn't careless." I met her gaze. Flat. Unapologetic. "There is," I replied calmly. Her smile widened, like a net being drawn tighter. "Wonderful. We'll need to discuss how everything will be divided." I didn't flinch. "You'll find out tomorrow." Her face twitched, just for a second. She wasn't used to being kept out of the loop. Not by the girl she left behind. I arrived at the law office 15 minutes early the next morning, not because I was anxious, because I had waited for this moment for 7 years. Mr. Alton, my grandfather's attorney, greeted me with a warm nod. He had known Grandpa since the early Safip prototype days. He'd helped us incorporate, helped us secure grants, and now, he'd helped close the final chapter. The conference room smelled of polished wood and old secrets. In front of me sat a small wooden box, the one Grandpa told me not to open until this very meeting. 5 minutes later, they arrived. My mother, clicking in her designer heels like she owned the floor beneath her. My uncle, stern-faced. His wife, silent. My cousin, smirking like he was already dividing the spoils in his head. No one said hello. Mr. Alton cleared his throat and began, "This is the last will and testament of Mr. Thomas More. Signed, sealed, notarized, on his 90th birthday." He looked at me. "Miss Moore, please open the box now." I nodded and lifted the lid. Inside, his pocket watch, silver, elegant, worn soft at the edges. He used to wind it every morning at 7 a.m. Beneath it, a flash drive, and a note. I slid the drive to Mr. Alton. He plugged it in. The monitor came alive. There he was, Grandpa. My anchor. My stubborn, kind, brilliant old man. His voice filled the room, soft but certain. "If you're hearing this, then I'm gone. And if the people I think are in this room are actually there, well, I can't say I'm surprised." My mother shifted in her seat. My cousin glanced at the ceiling. "Let me be clear. I, Thomas More, leave the entirety of my estate, including Safip shares, property, patents, and personal accounts, to my granddaughter, Elena More. Everything." The room froze. My uncle's mouth parted in disbelief. My cousin choked on a scoff. My mother leaned forward, her voice sharp. "This isn't legal." She manipulated him. She was with him every day. Who knows what she told him? Mr. Alton lifted a notarized letter. "Mr. Moore underwent a full cognitive evaluation 2 weeks before this recording. Full capacity confirmed. No coercion. No edits. No question." My cousin stood. She was a janitor. She lived off him. The video continued, right on cue. "To those who say Elena took from me, I say this: she gave me 7 more years. 7 years of sunlight and tea. 7 years of learning, of laughter, of purpose. You gave me silence. She gave me life." My mother's face drained of color. Mr. Alton folded the documents neatly. "There are no alternate beneficiaries. A no contest clause is included. Any legal challenge will result in full forfeiture. Mr. Moore's wishes are absolute. No one said a word, there was only the faint hum of the AC, the rustle of papers, and the sound of entitlement dying quietly. As they left, my mother turned to me, and for the first time, there was something behind her eyes that looked almost like fear, but I didn't flinch, because she finally saw it. I wasn't the girl they left in the hallway. I was the woman he chose. The moment the glass doors shut behind us, she spun toward me, voice low and sharp. You think this makes you better than us? You tricked an old man. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You left him, I said. You left me. And for 7 years, you never once called to see if he survived. My uncle stepped in, trying to puff up, we're his children. You don't get to erase that. I looked at him, expressionless. Then tell me what that meant. What did being his child mean to you? Duty? Love? Or just a shortcut to a payday? He clenched his jaw. My cousin crossed his arms. We'll go public. Tell the press you manipulated a man with dementia. I smiled. Not out of amusement, but readiness. Do that, I said, and I'll release everything. Video logs. Journals. Medical records. His letters, about every call you didn't return. Every moment you left him behind. They went quiet, but I wasn't done. I reached into my bag, pulled out one last envelope. This was written a month before he passed, I said, handing it to my mother. It's not legal. It's personal. She hesitated, then opened it. Point 3. Words, written in Grandpa's unmistakable, clean handwriting. You walked away. Her hands trembled. She crushed the paper like she could erase the shame, but it didn't work, because some truths live beyond ink and memory. She didn't speak, not a word. Not a plea. Just silence, and that silence said everything. I turned to leave but paused at the door. You lost the inheritance, I said without looking back. But worse than that, you lost him. And not when he died. When you chose convenience over love. I walked into the sunlight, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small beneath their shadow. I felt whole. 6 months later, the house was quieter, but not lonely. I kept the kettle he loved. The chair by the window. His pocket watch, which I still wound every morning at 7:00 a.m., but my life wasn't about mourning. It was about building. I used a portion of the inheritance to launch the Moore Foundation, named not just for his surname, but for the man who grew gardens in the ashes of abandonment. The mission was simple: teach technical skills and offer emotional support to teens and elders who had been cast aside, just like we were. We started small. Point 3 laptops. 2 folding tables. A single rented room in a community center, but when one of our students built her first fall detection device and shouted, "It works. It actually works," I felt it again. That warmth. That spark, that was him, still alive, still teaching. A year later, we opened our first permanent workshop. 5 years later, one of our scholarship recipients became a lead developer at Safip. She invited me to her graduation. I never had a real family, she said, hugging me. But your foundation made me feel like I mattered. I gave her Grandpa's wrench, the one he said fixed more than machines. You do matter, I whispered. Don't ever let anyone make you forget that. I still live in the same house. Safip is bigger now. We've grown. But my life is still simple. No mansions. No yachts, just purpose. And peace, because I know now what wealth really is. It's not the money. It's the 7 extra years I got with the only person who ever saw me. It's the students who fix broken circuits and broken beliefs. It's the girl who stayed, and the woman she became. Sometimes, I think back to that hospital hallway. The silence. The terror. The pain, and then I look at what rose from that moment. Not bitterness, but belonging. Not revenge, but restoration. Not inheritance, but legacy. Tonight, I'll wind the pocket watch again, and one day, when I find someone ready, someone who needs to know they're not alone, I'll pass it on, not because it's valuable, but because it carries everything that ever mattered, and I'll say the same words he once whispered to me. You stayed. You built. And now, it's yours.